Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And I'm currently underway with the Gladiator Challenge, which is to get 2,400 arena rating on every single class. And one of the next classes that I have lined up is the Mage, and I've decided to go with the Frost specialization. I've been able to close out now to 2,000 rating. I just wanted to cover my thoughts on the spec, what I think about it, how good is it, how versatile is it, how flexible is it something that you should consider as a pickup right now for season 3 of Shadowlands. So Frostmage specifically focuses on snares, it focuses on roots, and it focuses on making sure that your enemies have the least amount of fun possible. So if you're maybe bordering psychopathy here, you might want to be picking up the Frostmage to get your entertainment from World of Warcraft, as your main purpose is to remove fun from your opponents, and that should be your main focus, especially during their highest damage cooldowns. Not to mention that it just keeps your team alive, but during their highest burst cooldowns, that's when they're going to be the most tilted. So you always want to be paying attention to that. You can utilize Frost Nova, Blizzard, Frozen Orb, and Polymorph to get that crowd control out onto the playfield and have control of it, and know that the enemies are really not having a good time, which is one of the most fun things about this spec. Another thing completely unique to the spec is Ice Wall, a PvP honor talent, which allows you to construct a wall. You can pretend that you're playing Fortnite occasionally here, or maybe not the newer version of it, but the previous version of it, and you can line of sight enemy healers with it or protect your teammates with it. There's a lot of versatility to it. So right at the start of the fight, I have all of my tools. I have Blizzard, I have Frozen Orb. What do I want to use here? The Rep Paladin and the Warrior, their offensive cooldowns are Avenging Wrath, as well as the Warbreaker from the Arms Warrior. So I don't want to send a Frozen Orb or a Blizzard just yet, because the Rep Paladin will use Freedom, and the Blizzard and AoE effects will break my polymorphs, which I want to utilize here on the Avenging Wrath and the Warbreaker. Grounding Totem is going to stop me from casting these, so I'm going to have to remove Grounding Totem and immediately focus on polymorphing, again, because we want to try and make our enemies as angry as possible. While we're interrupted, we're going to snipe the Healing Tide Totem, and as soon as we aren't interrupted, we're going to go immediately back to casting Polymorph onto the Ret and to the Warrior. You want to use defensive cooldowns during this time to be able to stay alive while the crowd control is trying to be landed. We can see we're using Mind Control as well. We fear the Shaman. We've removed 2 players from the enemy team at this point in time, and we can stop all of their damage entirely. And then we want to attack the target that isn't currently crowd controlled, in this case being the Warrior, and we're going to just throw as much damage as we can with our Deathborn active and our Power Infusion. We're spacing out our Icy Veins a bit here with our Deathborn proc, just because we're trying to bait out cooldowns. We still have the Ret and Shaman in crowd control, but now the Warrior's used a defensive cooldown, the Die by the Sword, and is unlikely to die. So we don't really want to be attacking the Warrior anymore through that defensive. So we're going to make a swap to the Ret Paladin out of the crowd control and move our polymorphs to the Warrior. This way the Warrior's not going to be having a good time. We switch our mind controls over to the Shaman. We keep 2 enemies completely controlled while we're isolating a target and putting even more pressure into the playfield. This way, if the Shaman panics and uses a defensive cooldown on the Ret, that won't be available for the Warrior later on. And we've used our Icy Veins and Deathborn during the swap, so the enemies are going to run away. This is when I've found the best time to use Frozen Orb, to use your Ice Flow move casts, is when enemies are running around the pillar, so that you can still cast your spells moving around the corner, and so that you can snare them down. This is the Ice Wall in use. The Ret Paladin and the Shaman are turtling at the pillar, so we'll wall them off from the Warrior, who we got the Die by the Sword from earlier, isolating the target and try and blast him down. If he retreats to his team, then they're going to stack up for AoE Blizzard. They're going to stack up for AoE Frostbolts on the Deathborn, and you do want to try to be casting as many Frostbolts during your cooldowns as possible. That should be your main priority, is Frostbolt. But of course, if enemies are line of sighting, don't be afraid to just shoot your procs as well. Here we're going to use Mind Control into the Shaman. This is pulling the Shaman out into the open during our cooldowns, which would be great for making a swap. We're going to put a Blizzard down on the ground to try and prevent their retreat, and use the Snare procs and Root procs to hold them in place and just do as much damage as possible. Frostmage specializes in running these double spellcasters. That seems to be the niche for Frost. It would be my recommendation. If you were playing with Shadow Priest, Balance Druids, Warlocks, maybe Elemental Shamans, these double ranged setups tend to be where you're going to shine. And again, that's because you're basically a turret, just playing tower defense for whoever's getting attacked, trying to pressure enemies away. But here we can see Avenging Wrath is active. we're going to polymorph the ret right away, try and get the ret away from whatever target they're going after, and use all of our diminishing returns during that time. And our healer was in a Hammer of Justice, so we've stopped them from connecting during a critical moment. Our Shadow Priest Greater fades out of the Spear of Bastion to avoid the increase of damage that the warrior would get, and we can also just polymorph the warrior on their Warbreaker, taking them out of the fight. You have to know that healers can dispel polymorph, so you want to be timing your next polymorph almost immediately after your first one when you know dispel is available or the shaman isn't crowd controlled, so that way you're just immediately snagging more polymorphs. We're going to pop our mirror images just to keep snares up on the target at this point, and use Frost Nova to get more distance for our Shadow Priest, and we can use an Ice Flows and also cast polymorph. So running Ice Flows rather than Shimmer doesn't mean that it's impossible to sheep healers. You're just going to need to position so you can Ice Flows move cast around corners. We're going to snipe Healing Tide Totem as much as we can, keep the shaman in crowd control, and the Ret and Warrior don't have damage enhancing cooldowns, so I'm not too worried about polymorphing them right now. I would much rather be working on just doing damage and keeping polymorphs going out onto the shaman to try and force more defensive cooldowns from our enemies in this position, which at this time appears to be the Ret Paladin. But when you don't have your Deathborn and when you don't have your Icy Veins, you are not nearly as threatening as during those cooldowns. So it's much more of a high priority to play aggressive during that window. Tell your teammates to use defensives on you to keep you aggressive, because once that window is gone, you will notice the drop in pressure is substantially lower than during those cooldowns. But now we've got polymorphs on the warrior, mind controls onto the shaman. We've isolated the Ret Paladin, so we can target down the Ret Paladin, keep the warrior and polymorphs to stop those intervenes from coming through to assist with the Ret Paladin. That gets Shield of Vengeance. We pop the shield, which redirects damage. You can see that pressure onto my Shadow Priest. So I move to try and cast polymorphs. Here we have diminishing return available for shaman, so we're going to get control of the shaman with polymorph and stun the Ret Paladin at the same time. This is a good coordinated setup whenever the healer is crowd controlled to stun the target that you're attacking with whatever stuns your team has available. So in this position, the Holy Priest is a great stun with the Chastise, definitely a recommended healer right now in Season 3 for Shadowlands. And we just keep the shaman chained polymorphed. We've mind controlled the Ret away, and we've got the warrior isolated in the middle of the map. So we'll just keep chucking out Frostbolt after Frostbolt, trying to fish for flurry procs to get some massive instant damage. But with Die by the Sword up, as we saw earlier, we might not be able to finish the warrior. We have Siphing on him as well, reducing incoming healing, trying to keep our pressure going as much as possible. And we can drop an Ice Wall just right in the middle to cut the shaman off from the warrior. So now the shaman has to run around the corner the long way to get into line of sight to try and get some heals onto the warrior. This is why being able to clutch out these Ice Walls in the middle of a fight is so important on Frost Mage. The better that you can get at it, you will be able to carry games and win games with it as a result. So you definitely want to practice with it. It can be a bit weird to use. You put it on the ground where your cursor is, and then you turn your character to turn the wall. So I definitely recommend picking it up now and practicing it maybe in some random battlegrounds or something, because it is a kind of a unique skill set that you're going to have to build on the Frost Mage, and it can definitely win you games. Here, Spear of Bastion is down for the warrior, so we're going to use polymorphs onto the Ret Paladin, try and remove the enemy attackers, at least one of them, from play at the moment during those damage enhancing cooldowns. Still a very important component for climbing a Frost Mage, and good to have awareness for in the fight. Immediately afterwards, switch the polymorph over to the warrior, and then just go back right onto the Ret Paladin, always keeping one of the enemy attackers at bay during that strong cooldown window. And we're just maxing out as much damage as we can while polymorphing the alternative target. In this way, we keep both control of the fight, so we're not going to be overwhelmed, as well as cause pressure constantly by swapping targets. And as soon as the Ret Paladin tries to move out of the pillar, we're going to use Blizzard at the corner. This way, if the shaman wants to poke and heal, it'll be tough. Fortunately, I went for a polymorph. You have to be really careful with your AoE when you're going for polymorph, because it's going to break it. But we go for a fear regardless, lands double, and we can just drop some instant flurries to crush the warrior who used Die by the Sword earlier with the silence onto the restoration shaman. So you're always able to create havoc with crowd control spam like this, and really keep control of the fight, top the damage meter at the same time. I did a substantial amount of damage this game. I was getting comments from people in solo shuffles that I was queuing up, because it's been a while since I played a mage. I feel like the last time I played mage was maybe Legion, but during this challenge I've really had to kind of try and expand my knowledge of classes and develop skills to be able to climb the ladder. If you'd like to join in that live, twitch.tv/Supatease, and I'm doing my best to stream there pretty much every day, so there's always going to be good content there on my climb throughout this challenge. But I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you got some insight into Frost Mage, potentially piqued your curiosity and interest in trying one or picking one up yourself. And other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. I will catch you in the next one.